Okay, is there sound now? Any sound now? There should be sound. I can see that there should be sound, but I don't know if everyone can hear that there can be sound. Yay! I think people can hear me now. Great. One day, I might turn the music down a little bit, but okay. One day, we'll start a stream with no technical issues. That'll be a good day. But today's a good day as well because it's nice and sunny. It's the Easter bank holiday, which I completely forgot about. So I'm sorry everybody for disrupting your Easter weekends. How are you all? I can see some familiar faces in the chat already. Maison Imgarde, hello, lovely to see you. And Rachel from La Bricoluse, who is one of my moderators in the chat, and she's also a milliner. So this is a Q&A, and if there's questions that you guys have and I can't answer, I'm sure Rachel, who has more years of experience than I do, will also be able to help out. Oh, let's start with a little sip of tea after the stressful no audio start. Okay, great. So we've got audio, we've got music, we've got video. I guess we should start. Properly start. Hello again and welcome to a Millinery Studio live stream. My name is Ilona. I'm a milliner based in London. It's been a while since I've been live online. You can follow me on Instagram at @ByIlonaMillinery if you're new here. Go and check that out. That's where I post all my hat pictures, occasional advice, and kind of more tips and tricks if today's tips and tricks won't be enough for you. So, I put out a call for questions a few days ago, and I've had a few questions, and I've also prepared a little PowerPoint presentation for today to take you through my kind of millinery journey. So where I started, why I started, who I learnt from, where I learnt from, and the kind of hats I made along the way, things that I've learnt along the way that I think can be useful to know to others. Not necessarily like actual techniques, but how I've applied certain techniques that I've learned. I always think that application of techniques is sometimes more interesting than just like, you know, recreating a hat that's already existing in the world. But you might spot a hat with a technique and go, oh, I like that technique, but I don't like how that looks. Let me see if I can translate that into something that I like the look of, which is essentially kind of how I work. So I'll take you through how I got into that. And I guess to kick things off, I'm going to start with the first question. I'm very technological here and the questions are on my phone. Let's see. So Ava on Instagram asked me, how did you get into making such beautiful hats and your dancing? Well, this is exactly what I have a whole slideshow about. So thank you for your question, Ava. I shall answer that throughout the next 2 hours, gradually taking you from the beginning to where I am now, and also talk a little bit about where I plan to be in the future soon, where I'm heading. To answer the second part of that question with the dancing, how did I get into the dancing? Well, I like to say that I've actually been dancing since I was -1 years old because my mum used to go out partner dancing while she was pregnant with me. So I've been dancing literally all my life, plus a little bit more. And that's also where I met my husband. So my husband was my dance partner, and we still dance a little bit when we want to, but mainly it's all hat making now. More hat making than dancing, but there was a time when there was more dancing than hat making. And actually the dancing really links into how I got into hat making, because I always thought, well, so I do a vintage style of dancing called swing dancing, and everyone likes to put kind of flowers in their hair or something in their hair. And I kind of thought to myself, well, flowers are a bit boring. Everybody puts flowers in their hair. So what can I do to just be a little bit different and just a little bit more extra. And I thought the next step up from a hair flower is putting a flower on a hat and then putting that hat on my head. So that's why I got into hat making, and it was never meant to be a career choice. It was just meant to be a little bit of fun. I just taught myself dressmaking just before I started hat making from my grandmother's books, and I couldn't find a lot of resources in books for hat making because about 5 years ago there wasn't a lot of stuff on the internet about hats yet. There's a lot more now than there was 5 years ago, but at that time it was really difficult to even find the names of what books I should read to get into hat making. So I did what everyone kind of does and just went and signed up to a hat course. And let me show you the hat that I made on this hat course. Hopefully this will work. Ta-da! Here's my slideshow. Let's see if I can change the slideshow. There we go. Yes, I can. So this is the first hat I made. So there's 3 pictures in the slide on the screen. The red button hat at the back with the weird looking flowers and the silk satin bow, that's my one. The other 2 in the picture were made by the other 2 ladies on the course. It was an absolutely tiny course. It was in Soho. For those of you who know London, it's kind of central London area where all the fabric shops are, and there was a little tiny millinery shop tucked away down a back alley called Atelier Millinery. And the course was called Introduction to Millinery, and I did that in January 2017. And it was meant to be just a fun little afternoon, nothing too serious. And on that course, I learned how to block a button shape. Here is that button. It's looking a little bit worse for wear than in all the nice pictures up on screen, but that's pretty much because I've taken it apart and redone it several times just to recycle various bits of materials from it, because I've never actually worn this hat. Let me show you a close-up of the hat itself. I have a new setup here, so I'm just trying to get used to it. Ah, there we go. Oh, there's my teapot in the way. So here is the close-up of this button hat. As you can see, so over here, this is where the flowers were attached, so it's all dented. But it's just a standard red button hat, and on this course I learnt how to stiffen wool felt with a chemical stiffener, how to block the dried wool felt on a button block, then how to wire it. On the inside there is a wire with a wire join. Oh, it's a bit too, I can't really get a good, oh, you can just about see a wire in there, just in there. And then I learnt how to attach a elastic and also a invisibly sew in a Petersham ribbon. So you can't actually see the stitching here because it should be sewn in invisibly. It's not the best fitting Petersham ribbon, and it's definitely not the best button that anyone has ever seen that I have blocked, but it's good for a first try, I think. So that was that, and obviously you can see on the other pictures there, the other 2 hats have a felt poppy flower, but I just had to be different and not do a poppy flower, but do some weird fantasy flower thing of just layered petals of felt, just because I didn't like the look of the poppy flower. I wanted something a bit more special than just a poppy. And then the tutor, Tina Giuntini, who has actually been my favourite millinery tutor. I don't think she's teaching anymore. I think she's gone into retirement, I'm not sure. But I bought some hat blocks from her recently, and yeah, she's a really great teacher. And she suggested that I add an extra bow onto the hat that I started with. And I think at the time, I didn't really understand proportion or shape or size or anything like that. But as you can see, it does kind of need it. In that picture, it does look a bit sparse without the bow. And then with the bow, which I don't think I ever actually sewed on, it was just being held there on a pin. But yes, should we move on to the next slide, please? Does that work? Oh dear, it's not working. Why is it not working? Husband, my slides aren't working. We'll just wait for my tech support to come and help me out. I guess I'll just take another cup of tea while I try and fix the slides. Hello. Why aren't my slides working?
I don't know.
So I did the thing and then it wouldn't change.
Let's switch.
Oh, now it did. Look at that. It changed.
It's just taking its time.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Okay. Well, here's the next slide. I kept to the proportions and sizes of just tiny button hats. And have I got something to show here? Yes, I do. I have this little one. Oh, it's not actually in that picture. But it's in the same vein as all the other hats on the screen, where it's just a shop-bought base, a shop-bought round button base, that I then covered in some leftover fabric that I had in my dressmaking cupboard. And so the two on the left there are poly braid bases, and the black one there I think might have been a cinema, like this one that I flattened out. And the reason I flattened them out to make them completely flat is because I didn't like how small and flat on the head a kind of pre-made cinema base did, because it wasn't a button. I don't actually know what this would have been called. It's just a cinema base. It's just made to just sit on the head, and I think it's supposed to be a fascinator base, but I didn't really want to make a fancy feathered fascinator. I wanted to cover something in fabric. And I wouldn't say it's the most successful thing ever, but again, this is all very beginner level. This is me having only done one course, which was felt, and notice none of these hats are felt. This is just me going home and thinking, what can I do to just decorate a hat base? Which I think is kind of how a lot of people start. And if I go on to the next slide, oh, it does seem to take its time with the slides. Why is it doing that? This isn't going as smoothly as I would have liked. Oh, there we go. There it is. There's the next slide. That is this hat. This is me wearing this hat. It's currently missing its bow, and it's I think it was goose bio feathers that I used on it. And it was attached to my head on a hairband. On a headband even, a metal headband. So this is all kind of made with pre-made materials, nothing particularly couture or exciting in this particular hat. Let me show you this close up. Can I figure out how this works? Yes. So here it is close up. And Rachel says that yes, they are kind of called fascinator bases. So look at the inside of that. That's just terrible, isn't it? But it's kind of, again, for a first or second hat try, it's not the worst, but it's definitely not the best. Could you sell something like this? Definitely not. Is it good for a one-off cosplay event? Yes, and that's pretty much exactly how I wore it. I think I wore it once for a dinner with a friend, and that's it. But I keep it in the cupboard, and the reason I keep it in the cupboard with me is so that I can look back on it and just remember how I did it, why I did it, and keep hold of it, because it's flat. It's not taking up a lot of space. There's no point in getting rid of it. I might as well keep it as a reminder, because what I do like, if I'm going to be a bit more positive about my work, I do like this pleating, and in fact, throughout the next kind of series of slides, you will see me doing a lot with pleats, because there's just something so beautiful about layered fabric or draped fabric that I really, really love. In case you don't know, I specialize in fabric covered hats, so that's why there's a lot of fabric, and I do work with felt and a bit with straw, but generally I specialize in buckram covered in silk velvet, silk dupion, chiffon, any other kind of silk or even cotton, any fabric really, on a buckram base. Next slide. Let's see how long this takes. As I progress, I'll try and get my head around clicking the next button well in advance of when we need to see the next slide. Is it gonna go? It worked last time. Is it going to work again? Please work. I wonder what... there we go. Okay, it worked. Okay, right. Here is a picture from a hat. Not from... technically from the second course I went to, but the flowers decoration on it, which I don't have this hat with me because I actually took it apart and reused it for parts later on. This is also a common theme. You'll see I don't have a lot of the hats I have pictures of because since making them I've taken them apart and reused bits of them. So this hat in itself, this is an open top pillbox with buckram, but there's no wire in it. Because clearly at this time, I hadn't yet figured out that one should wire the edges of buckram for it to hold its shape. So that was a shame. It was very, very, very flimsy. And, but what I do like about it is the flowers. And the flowers there, they're little daisies made with stiffened silk dupion and silk organza. And I learned how to make those with a tutor called Leanne Frederick from the London Hat Week in March 2018. So we've already progressed a whole year. I think we started in 2017 and now we're in 2018, I think. And that was a really lovely little course. I don't know if she's still teaching this one, but they are quite easy to make. You can figure them out on yourself. There are plenty of books available on how to make these kind of flowers. It's a very standard vintage flower making technique, and these were made using flower tools. And actually that really annoyed me, that the problem that I have with millinery and starting in millinery is it always feels like you have to buy all the tools and all the equipment, and I've always found myself looking for ways where I don't need to spend all that money to buy all the special tools and all the equipment, because let's be honest, if you're making a hat just for yourself, you don't really want to be spending £100–200 on a set of flower tools just so that you can decorate this one hat that you're going to wear once or twice to an event and then not wear again, and then those tools will sit in your cupboard. And actually this feeds into another question that I was asked this time on YouTube, and Anissa says, I have 1,000 of questions to ask, but I'll start with just 2. I want to wear hats made by me. Where should I start? So that's Anissa's first question. And the second question we'll actually get to at the end of the presentation. So stick around for part 2 of Anissa's question. But part 1, where should I start making hats? I mean, apart from going on a course and just kind of blindly jumping in, if you don't want to do that, have a think about what hats you like to look at. So what pictures you like to look at. Do you like to look at modern modern fashion catwalk images where they've got very modern hats, very on-trend fashionable hats? Or do you like looking at classic photos, or maybe even old family photos where you've got family members or people you know wearing vintage hats? Or do you like American mid-century hats? Or do you like Parisian, I don't know, Belle Epoque hats from the 1900s? So figure out what you like to look at, because if you like to look at it, you'll probably like wearing it. At least that's what I've found in my own experience. And once you've figured out what you like looking at and what you like wearing, you could go to a hat shop in a department store and try on some hats that they have there. And when you try them on, you'll start learning about what looks good on your head. And you'll pick them up and you'll feel the weight of them. You'll just get to handle them. Alternatively, you can go to a museum and just look at hats behind glass, but obviously you can't handle them in a museum. But just get a feel and maybe take lots of pictures of things you like. Then once you've figured out what it is you like, so if you follow my example, I like mid-century, kind of American and British hats, but also I have a soft spot for Dior, for Dior 1950s hats as well. So I know that that's what I like to look at. So then I start thinking about, okay, well, what unifies all these hats together? Is it the shape of the base? Is it the trim? Is everything trimmed with flowers, or is everything trimmed with feathers? Is it all pillboxes? Is it all hats with big brims? And that's going to give you an idea of what equipment you might actually need to buy, because don't buy a lot of equipment at the beginning because you don't know if you're going to use it. A lot of the time people come up to me and they say, oh, what hat block should I buy? Should I buy a crown block? Should I buy a brim block? Should I just buy all the blocks? Because sometimes you can buy sets of blocks. And I just think if you're just starting out, that's such a waste of money because you don't know if you're going to like them. If you're desperate to get your hands on a block, set up an eBay alert and see what comes up. But the number one thing you really should buy, and I think I will get onto this in one of the other slides, but for now I'll just show you over here. It's one of these. This is a poupée head. And in fact, when I was on the first millinery course, this is exactly what Tina suggested everyone should buy, is just a poupée head. This is actually a cork-filled wig head that you can buy on Amazon. It's got kind of a hole in the bottom so you can stick it onto a tripod or onto like a something that will hold it upright, but it can just stand on the surface. It doesn't need anything extra. And because it's fabric, I have covered it in cling film to just keep it protected when I use it. And what this is it's very useful to model your hat on. So once you've figured out, okay, I like things with lots of feathers, how do you position those feathers on your head? You get one of these and you get a load of feathers and you get a lot of pins and you put the feathers onto the poupée head however you like, and you pin them in, and then you take lots of pictures. Take lots of pictures, 360, take a video like of what you've created on your poupée head, and use that as a starting point of maybe buy a base from a millinery supply shop, like one of those fascinator bases, and translate what you've done on the poupée head onto the fascinator base or a pillbox base. You can buy lots of different shapes that are pre-made. And I think that's a good place to start. So I hope I've answered your question, Anissa. Let me know in the comments or in the chat if I haven't answered it, and I'll try and answer it better. Right, let's switch back to the slides. And hopefully it will all work. There we go. That's getting a bit faster now. So once again, you can see that pleating theme coming through. So this was a hat that I thought to myself, what did I not like about that first hat? Where did that first hat end up? Here it is. What did I not like about this? I didn't like the size. I thought it was too small. It looks too much like a fascinator. I don't really want to make fascinators. I want to make big hats. Or well, not giant hats, but just something a bit bigger, something a bit more substantial. So then I made myself a buckram base. And this is, once again, it's missing the berries because I needed to reuse them for something else. Let's see if I can show you a close-up. Here it is. So here are all these pleats. And I've positioned them kind of radially going forwards. This is curtain fabric. I would not recommend using curtain fabric in your millinery, but it's what I had in my cupboard and I just wanted to use it up. And this is what I've ended up with. I think you can kind of see the stitching in it, and I mean, at this point I wasn't concerned about what the underside looked like, because here's a tip for when you're starting out. Don't worry about lining the hats. It's not necessary. It's time consuming, it's boring, it's tedious. Don't worry about what the underside looks when you're just starting out. Just get your head around general shapes and how they look on a head. So if I switch back to the view where you can see my head and pop this on, you see how much bigger this hat is compared to this little one over here. You see how it just totally changes the proportions of how my head looks. And that's the kind of thing you're looking out for when you're starting. Or at least that's... I used to kind of always look at trims and how does the trim look. But looking back, I think it would have been more useful if I had noticed proportion and shape more than I'd thought about how can I trim the hat. And I think that's actually something that a lot of people do when they start out. They get excited by all the trims, and that's not a bad thing, that's great. Let's all be excited about feathers and flowers and ruffles and all the wonderful things, but at the end of the day, it's a structure, and the structure needs to complement your head shape and your clothing, and that's something that you want to keep in mind with these when you're starting out. So that was July 2018. What's next? Next up, it's my very first pillbox, which I made in, oh, the screen's a bit covered there, in 2018, in July 2018 for a friend's wedding. I don't have that particular pillbox anymore, but maybe as you can see in that picture, once again, I'm going to be very critical of myself. The stitching is not great, and I did not iron that fabric. You can see the creases in it. Big mistake. Coming from a seamstress background, I should have known that I needed to iron the fabric, but I didn't. But oh well, that was now almost exactly 4 years ago, and I've definitely learned a lot more about hats in this 4-year period than I did in that first year when I was making hats completely blind. Because this hat, I did not go on a course. I don't think I even opened up a millinery book. I just kind of went, I have buckram, and I have wire, and I have cotton, and I have silk. Let's smash it all together. And I think it took me ages because I couldn't quite figure out how to do it. But good news, since then, I have figured out how to do it. And a while back, you might remember, I made a video about how to make 5 styles of pillbox, and this is one of those pillboxes. So here it is. It's lined. It has a ribbon. It actually has a good fastening, and it's got no creases. So since making that first pillbox, I've made this second pillbox, and I think it looks much better. It's a lot squarer. It's a lot better proportioned. It's actually holding its shape. And I mean, it looks very similar, obviously, because it is the same design. It's just made using proper millinery techniques rather than whatever Ilona in 2018 thought was necessary to make a hat. So here it is now, and if I pop it onto my head, the front is where the comb is. There it is. I think that's rather well proportioned, and I did make it to kind of sit straight on the head, so not to one side, but you could wear these to one side if you like. That can work for some people. I don't think it works for me, but I think there's a lot of people who like to wear their hats on an angle, but I don't. Anyway, that was my first pillbox, and I fell in love with pillboxes from this day, or from this month of July 2018, and to this day they are my favorite hat shape. Well, I have 2 favorite hat shapes, but we'll get on to my other favorite hat shape, but it's a close call between this one and another hat shape. Oh, there we go. So this is where I was supposed to talk about the pupa head, which is this one. But I've already spoken about the pupa head, so I guess we'll move on. Although one thing I didn't mention with this pupa head, which you can see in this picture, which you can't quite see on the video here, is I've got some stitching marks in it. And what that is that's just some guidelines for me on my pupa head, whose name is Anne. I like to name my pupa heads just like seamstresses name mannequins. It's the contour of my hairline. So this front one. So this is, you can see better on the picture than you can on the video, but it's the hairline. I've got little marks for where the tips of my ears are, and the back of my head, there's a little mark there. There's a center top mark as well. These are all just really useful marks to have on a pupa head for when you're placing designs and things onto it and pinning them in, just so you don't have to mark it out every single time. So I just sewed them on with a curved needle. That's what all those marks are. No one ever really told me to do that. I just kind of figured, you know, seamstresses mark the mannequins, so why can't I mark my pupa head? We'll move on to the next slide. Okay, this is where things start getting really interesting. At least I think this is where things start getting really interesting. Oh, I missed some things in the chat from Rachel. Rachel says, we sometimes don't line hats in theatrical millinery too, depending on the time and finish of them. Great, yes. This is why I absolutely love theatrical millinery. And sometimes I think that in the kind of fashion hat world, we focus too much on couture and impeccable finish and everything's lovely. And the truth is, only you are going to see the inside of your hat. And if you're making it for just yourself and you can't be bothered to line it, don't line it. Obviously it's a bit different if you're selling your hat and there's an end customer. That's a bit of a different situation. Oh, my music has stopped. Sorry, everybody. Oh, it's because, oh well, there'll be no music for the rest of this stream because things have crashed. Oh well, never mind. No music then. Doesn't matter. We'll just carry on talking about hats. Where was I? What was I talking about? Oh yes, lining or not lining. It's the ultimate question. Anyway, back to what's actually on the slide. On the slide is this hat. I didn't wear a hat today for the stream because I thought I should potentially put hats on. This is the favorite hat my most favorite hat that I think I've ever made. It's not my favorite shape. Like I've said, I like pillboxes and another style of hat that I'll get onto later. But this is in general my most favorite hat. I think it's just so wonderful. It's like a crown. And the story of this hat is this is what really got me interested in hat making. So all the other hats had kind of just been little experiments, just something I did in my spare time to pass the time in the evenings. But this is where I seriously got into millinery. So this was from September 2018. And I went to a vintage fair, and the picture on the left, you'll see me wearing a similar hat to this, but it's not this exact hat. It's the original vintage hat that I bought, and I think I've spoken about this in some of my previous streams. And in this hat was it was a mess. It was falling apart. I wore it on that one day, and that's the only photo I have of me in the original vintage hat. And when I took it off my head, all the straw from inside the hat fell out. Now, at the time, I thought it was straw, but since then, I've realized that it was a material called spartree, which, of course, I didn't know at the time. But you can't buy that material anymore. I'd only done, I think, 1 or 2 millinery courses by this point, so I had no idea what that even was. But in hindsight, I remember what it looked like and what it felt like, and it was definitely a spartree base. But I didn't know that. I thought the closest thing was going to be buckram. So I went and bought some buckram, and I've got my pooper head. As you can see in some of my process images, this is me trying to recreate the shape. Because there was no salvaging this hat. There was no saving it. I couldn't save any of the velvet that was covering it because the velvet was very worn. I couldn't save the base and recover the base because it had completely disintegrated. I couldn't even save the lining because that had been eaten away at by moths, which is why all the straw fell out, because there were just massive holes in the lining. So all I could do was just try and copy it. Oh, what I did save though was all this decoration. So this decoration is original. But of course, what does a person who doesn't know anything about hats go and do when they try and recreate a hat? They make a lot of mistakes along the way because they don't know what they're doing. But that's okay, because we've got to learn somehow. And if that's not going on a course, then that's messing around in the kitchen trying to make your own hat block out of plaster, which is kind of what the middle image and the weird images of the black things are. That's the original hat shape covered in layers of gaffer tape, which I then Vaselined on the inside so that I could pour in plaster to try and clone the shape. It was not reinforced with wire, so obviously as I poured the plaster in, it warped and it changed the shape, but I didn't know that at the time. I was a blissfully ignorant beginner, and eventually I ended up with a hat shape Oh, oh dear. I think I've broken the stream again. I think I have. 1 second, everybody. I clicked the wrong thing. Oh, and now my mouse has disappeared. Wow, okay. Do you know what? Let's go for a quick break while I try and fix all the technical issues. Will that work? No, we can't even go to a break. Hello, everybody. I think I'm back. Can everybody hear me? I have a feeling. Oh no, okay, the microphone's working. Hopefully the screen is working as well. I think maybe I've overstretched myself with technology today. I think I've reached my technological limit and I should stick with what I know. And doing a slideshow live without a second monitor might have been one step too far for me. Let's get straight back to that slideshow. There it is. How is everybody doing? Is everyone keeping up with me okay? Am I making any sense? Because if I'm speaking too fast or I'm not explaining anything properly, let me know in the chat. And I'll slow down and I'll explain things a little bit better for you. But I guess we're all good. So moving on, or rather moving back to this hat that I'm wearing in my head. So currently what you're seeing on screen is my attempt at making this hat out of all these pieces that I'd pieced together out of buckram on a self-made plaster block. And you can actually see in that bigger picture all the lumps and bumps in the plaster block. So what you're seeing in the images now is not the hat that's on my head. Oh, hello everyone in the chat. Michael says, happy Easter. I'm just jumping on now, but we'll catch up with the beginning later this week. Well, I don't know how much you've missed because we just had a string of technical issues once again. And Leanne says, Leanne, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm very sorry if I've mispronounced your name. Enjoying the chat even with tech difficulties. Thank you. Thank you for sticking with me, everyone. Right, so back to this hat. So, vintage hat, fell apart, tried to make own block, using buckram, no idea, beginner, don't know what I'm doing, Or rather, to be honest, at the time, I remember that I really wasn't panicked at all. I, at the time, thought I was an absolute genius. My, my confidence levels were just through the roof. I thought that I was doing an absolutely excellent job. But looking back at this, there's definitely a few things that I would correct for myself. And that is what I did eventually end up doing with this hat. And actually, where we see that picture on the bottom left, that's where I kind of left this hat. I didn't take it any further than that, than what you see in these pictures. And I put this hat aside. And this is something that I found myself doing quite a lot sometimes, is kind of coming to a dead end in a project and just thinking, I don't know what the next step is. And instead of panicking or completely freaking out or throwing the whole project away and starting from the beginning, I tended to just put it in a box, label it with what was inside, put it on top of my wardrobe, and just think, one day I'll be brave enough to attempt that again. And I kind of do the same with a lot of things in life in general. So I've got right next to me, to my left actually, at the by my feet is a whole box of unfinished sewing projects that went wrong. And I'm not going to throw them away because I don't like wasting material. I will eventually find another use for them. And as long as they're not expanding out of that one box, it's fine. So I did eventually come back to this hat and fix it up. Shall I quickly take you through what's going on actually in that picture and how I would correct it? So for a start, the buckram is bumpy. That's just the hat block that was bumpy. There's nothing really I could have done about that other than spending a lot more time on smoothing out the plaster hat block that I had made. But I'm not a very patient person. I want to kind of get things done quickly and move on to the next exciting project. So I didn't. And that's what happens when you're not patient. Things go lumpy and bumpy and not great. So I always have to tell myself to just take a break, take a breath, put it to one side, come back to it when I feel like I've got a bit more patience left in me, because I remember at that time I just wanted to get it done, and clearly, bad idea. Michael says, I call that box in my house my sewing box of humility. Oh, don't call it that. It's not a box of humility. It's a UFO box of things that you have chosen tactfully not to complete just yet. Or at least that's what I tell myself and my husband when my husband says, oh, what's in that box? So back to the hat. Around the edge there, you can see a pink ribbon. What that is at the time, I didn't realize that what I should have potentially done is folded the buckram over the edge. So over the edge of the wire. So the shape is wired. And that ribbon is hiding the wire. Because if the wire was just left out in the open, it would have had a very bumpy front, which would be over here. And that would be visible through the velvet and the way that the velvet would reflect the light. So I figured I should cover it with something, and I just had a ribbon lying around, so I did that. After doing that, I realized that instead of a ribbon, a better edge finishing on hats like this is just pre-made cotton bias binding tape that you can sew on. Even with a sewing machine, you can do that with the buckram. But I didn't know that at the time I was making this. That's kind of one of the conclusions I came to making this hat. So if we think about different ways of learning, you've got going on courses, you've got finding information on the internet and reading books, or my personal favorite way, which is just diving head in straight into a project and just doing it and seeing what happens and learning from that. People call it learning from mistakes. I don't like to call it mistakes. It's just learning by doing and coming to conclusions about what worked and what didn't work. Always self-evaluating. And I still do that now. I did it then in 2018, and I still self-evaluate now about what I could do better, how could I do differently. What could I do differently? So even in this pillbox that I showed you before, essentially everything I say in the tutorial for this pillbox, it stands up, but maybe this isn't my best made hat because I was making it on the video, trying to make it fast, and I think I would just, next time I make this, I'd want to slow myself down a bit so I can take a bit more time in the stitching, you know? So again, self-evaluating with everything, not just the hats from the past, but still now. What else about this hat? I think that's it really for that iteration of the hat. We'll come back to this hat later on, I think a year on from this, in the slideshow. You'll be able to see a few more things. Here we go. This was another course I went on, and this was the best millinery course I have ever done. I even got a certificate of attendance like they give you in primary school. So I'm quite proud of that. What did I learn on this course? So this was in December 2018. This was a vintage millinery workshop held at Central St. Martin's, which is an art college here in London. And the course was run by Judy Bentnick and Tina Giuntini. So I took the course because I saw that Tina was teaching on it and I thought I must take it. And I met Judy Bentnick on the course as well. She's been a milliner for many years and she learnt from Rose Corey, also here in London. And Rose Corey used to make hats for the Queen. So that's quite a high prestigious line of millinery tutors. And I learned how to make 3 hats on this course. That big, the central picture there with the grey hat was a kind of free-form felt, which was the first time I'd ever encountered this idea, this technique. And what caught my eye with this specific technique is that this course was kind of advertised as a course where you didn't have to have a specific hat block later. So I thought this sounds like a great course that I could take and then apply to my own ideas and my own time at home without needing any kind of hat block, essentially other than the poupée head, which I already had. I did make a note there on the slide that I did buy my first wooden crown block after this course, and that was on Tina's advice. And Tina said, if you're looking to buy a wooden block, the best thing to do is to buy a standard crown block in your head size made out of wood. You can find vintage ones on eBay, set up an alert. Don't pay more than, £80 to £100 for it. They shouldn't be that expensive. You could even splash out on a new one if you really wanted to, but if you're not sure, the vintage ones should be cheaper. And if they're not, then that's a rip-off. But this is the one that I ended up buying after the course. Let me show you a close-up of that. So this is the wooden crown block. I actually wouldn't recommend that someone buys such a flat dome crown block for your first block. You're better off buying a domed block. So a domed block has more of a shape of this kind of rounded dome. It's a bit more versatile than this flat one, but I think I bought this one for £70 plus postage on eBay, so I wasn't going to let that pass up. And I've got quite a small head at 54 centimeters, so this was the only one available on eBay at the time, and I just wanted to get it just to have so I can experiment with, and that's what I ended up buying. But I do actually quite like this flat shape. I have found it rather useful for straw hats, but we'll get onto that all later. But this is a very, very old block, and all these marks on it, this is me putting some masking tape on it just to mark front, back and side to side, just to have all the marks on it as well. I would never draw with a pen or a pencil straight on one of these wooden vintage blocks. I wouldn't want to kind of sully them and ruin them like that. In fact, this one could probably do with a bit of sand and a revarnish just to keep it in good shape. And while I've got this camera view on, I'll show you a couple of the other hats I made on that course. Oops, put the feathers in front of the camera. I don't actually have that freeform felt that I made on that course because I made that as a present for my grandma, so she's got it in Russia. And she doesn't really wear it because she says it's too fancy for her. But never mind. I made it for her and she's got it in her cupboard. This was the other hat I made on the course. This is rather a pin tuck turban made on a sewing machine. And I do have a video on how to make a turban like this. Now, I don't I would never normally make videos on a technique that someone else has taught because I don't want to take away from their teaching business. But this is quite a universal technique that I've also come across in books and in free-to-view library books on the internet. So I figured this was okay to kind of share with everyone. And that course that I took at Central St. Martin's is no longer running anyway. So I figured it was okay to share that information with all of you. And if you want to go and look at how I made this is in my millinery bias pleats video. So here is one of these. And the other hat I made on that course was this one. Again, not this exact one. When I'd done it on the course, I hadn't lined it. So this is, again, one of those cases of I went on a course, I learnt the kind of basic things, and then I went home and I fiddled with it some more and thought about what I could do. So Judy also taught us how to make these velvet leaves. Once again, a very universal method, and this has been one of the most useful things I've ever learnt how to do because I absolutely love velvet leaves. And it was actually also on this course that I realised how much I love working with silk velvet. So that's a very useful piece of information I've learnt on this course. Not just how to make this kind of draped hat, but just in general, the fact that I just really, really love silk velvet because, oh, it feels so soft. If you've ever touched silk velvet, oh, it's so glorious. So here is one of these hats. Oh, and this is that second hat shape that I really, really like. So for me, it's always a kind of race between pillboxes and this shape. This shape is called a callow half hat. And if you're a beginner and you don't know what you like, you don't know what you want to make, apart from a pillbox, this is a pretty safe bet because once again, all you need to make one of these is just a poupée head. So all it is, it's just a bit of buckram with some wire on the edge. So if you know how to do buckram, if you know how to do wire, you can do this. You can make one of these. And in fact, I do really want to make a video that's going to be all about callow half hats because I think they're so overlooked in modern millinery. We don't really see many of these, but I keep selling these, so they must be popular, right? So I want to show you guys how to make them because I think they're going to come back big soon. And maybe all of us can make that happen by just making lots of them. So yes, that's my other favourite hat shape. Where did we get to on the slides? I wanted to, a quick side note here of that picture of me looking rather proud over there. That's me sitting at an industrial sewing machine. And honestly, I'm very sorry, husband, but this has been the highlight of my life. It wasn't our wedding, darling, I'm sorry, but it was this moment where I got to sit at an industrial sewing machine and sew all those pleats for the turban because my goodness, those industrial sewing machines, they run beautifully. To be honest, this course not only really sparked my interest in hats, but clearly it sparked a passion for sewing machines because I can't help myself now with sewing machines. I want to buy all the sewing machines. I want to open up all the sewing machines. I want to oil the sewing machines. I want to fiddle with the sewing machines. They're great. One day, I would like to have an industrial sewing machine like that Juki over there with the table, and yes, one day I will have enough space to have one of those machines. It just makes me so happy. I've not experienced such a sensation since using an industrial sewing machine. Okay, I should move on from that. Rachel says, velvet leaves are so lovely. I went to a millinery liquidation sale a few years ago and they were selling bags and bags of vintage velvet leaves. My goodness, Rachel, what a jackpot. I hope you bought them all. Right. Oh, do you know what? I'm just going to flick back to the previous slide for a second, and just a little aside on that millinery course that I'd been to, the Central St. Martin's one. On these pictures, you see I've got the buckram, and then I've got pictures of it being covered in the velvet. There's nothing there between the buckram and the velvet, and of course at this point, I didn't know that I needed to cover the buckram in something to cushion it against the velvet. And that is something that I learnt on this course, which was Judy was teaching that when you work with any kind of straw or buckram or any kind of a harder millinery material, and you want to cover that in fabric, whether it's silk velvet or dupion or anything like that, you need to cushion it. You need to have some kind of soft barrier there so that the fabric drapes nicely, and so that any kind of lumps and bumps within the buckram or straw or whatever don't translate into the shine that the fabric will have once it's a finished hat. So I guess some knowledge that I would like to pass on to you guys if you're thinking of getting into millinery is you can't just learn in one way. You've got to kind of have a triage, maybe. We could call it a triage, a Venn diagram of learning opportunities of courses, books, and experimentation. Because while I went head in straight into trying to recreate this hat, I did not have enough skills or knowledge to make it well. And only by going on this course, I stumbled upon the right information, because I wouldn't have even known to look for that information in a book. But now that I know that that exists, I can now go and find this information in books and read up extra on it. So you kind of need all three, but it's up to you how much of each triangle or circle in the Venn diagram you want to do, and how much one will take over from the others. Rachel says, we call that layer mulling in the US. I think there is a fabric called mull here in the UK. It's not quite the same as Demet. It's kind of like a cross between cheesecloth and tarlatan, I think. Of course, if you're new to millinery, all these terms are going to go straight over your head. Don't worry, you don't need to know about that. This is very specialist, vintage, historical costuming knowledge. And one day I will read all my books about it and I will tell you all about it, but I haven't got round to that yet. So don't worry too much about all these fancy fabrics if you're a beginner. Right, moving on. Oh, Rachel says cotton flannel or ice wool, or sometimes even low loft quilt batting is all used for mulling. Depends on the hand of the fashion fabric you're using. Oh, I see. So it's like a kind of a category name. Okay. But I do think there is a specific fabric here in the UK that we call mull. I will have to look that up. You've now piqued my interest, Rachel. This lovely hat over here. Oh, I didn't actually get it out of the cupboard. Oh well, never mind. You'll have to just marvel at it on the picture. I can't show you a close-up of it. But what this is this is me going home from the hat course and thinking, okay, I've just done this course. I need my hands to remember the techniques. And one of the techniques was free-form wool shaping, wool felt shaping. And I had an old, well, I say an old, a kind of vintage reproduction, secondhand hat base in my cupboard. And I thought, do you know what, I've got this. I don't like how it is. I'm going to try and apply the techniques that I've just learnt on the Central St. Martin's course to this hat. And I wasn't able to really shape it much. It was quite a small kind of, it was like a little stewardess pillbox thing that sat on the side. And I wasn't really able to do much with it. But what I did do is I kind of stretched it out and exaggerated some of those kind of ridges in it. You can see there's a bit of you can see where the shadow's falling. That was me kind of pinching it together to exaggerate those dimples in the felt. And then on top of that, I stuck on some, well, I didn't stick on, I sewed on some velvet, silk velvet holly leaves and some vintage berries. Of course, once again, reinforcing those techniques that I just learned on the hat course about making velvet leaves at home. So once again, practice, 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 and that's essentially what I was doing. And if you'd like to see how to make one of these velvet holly leaves, I have a Christmas themed hat making video on that, which my husband will hopefully post in the chat. And you can go and have a look at that, how to make those there. I so love velvet leaves, and just velvet in general. It's just so soft and so shiny, and it's so easy to work with as well. You don't need to be scared of working with velvet. It's really not as hard as some people make it out to be. You've just got to be confident. Next picture, next slide. So once again, another course that I went on. So once I'd been to the Central St. Martin's course with Judy Bentnick, I thought to myself, okay, well, I really like how Judy taught how to make flowers. And she was hosting a flower making course at, I think it was at London Hat Week in April 2019, or maybe it was separate from London Hat Week. I can't remember. It was April 2019 anyway, and it was a course all about making flowers by hand, using the techniques that she'd learnt from Rose Corey. And since then, I've also learned that these techniques are actually kind of 100 years old, and they're all documented in one of the first millinery books, which I think was written by a milliner called Anna Ben Youssef in like 1909 or something. Maybe I should do a live stream on all my books. Maybe that would also be helpful to everyone. Just a live stream of all the books that I have, and I can go through them and kind of maybe not review, but report on what's in the books and why I like them. So next live stream, next month, that's what we'll do. We'll go over books. So I won't talk too much about books now. I'll just carry on with the slideshow and not go off piste. And I did actually do a video on how to make flowers without tools. Once again, Judy's no longer teaching this course, or at least not that I could find, so I figured it's okay to share it. And it's also information that's freely available in free online library resources. So if you didn't want to go on a course, you could just look it up anyway. But by all means, if you have a local millinery tutor who is teaching these things, go and sign up to those courses, because nothing is ever going to replace a face-to-face or like a one-to-one video session, because a lot of people do teaching through video now. Nothing is ever going to replace having a professional milliner there live, taking you through the steps and kind of holding your hand and telling you that everything is okay. Which is a lot of the time something that I actually find that I need, especially with technology. Someone just needs to hold my hand and say, it's okay, you've got this. Anyway, so on this course, I learned how to work with silk organza and rolling the edges, and also working with cotton organdy. And that picture in the top middle there of that kind of 5-petal orchid, that was not taught on the course. That was something I did when I got home, and I thought, right, I've got some leftover cotton organdy, and I'm going to see if I can apply those techniques that I've learnt to something else that I want to see if I can make. And I tried that orchid. I wouldn't say it was the most successful thing I've ever done. I've still got it somewhere in my bag of flowers. Let me know if you guys are interested in an orchid tutorial. Orchids are quite interesting flowers. They're not something you see a lot of, I think, in millinery. I think maybe that's why I'm slightly drawn to orchids. You've got lots of variations with how you can make orchids, and this is just one of them. And I think at some point later on in the slideshow that I have another variation on how to make an orchid that I came up with by myself as well. So we'll get onto that. But I think next up, we've got the finishing of this hat. So there's that plaster hat block there in that top middle picture. It broke in half. Because I didn't know what I was doing. There was no way that plaster was going to hold its shape in that C curve without it breaking and shattering, obviously. And I couldn't put pins into it. I hadn't figured out at this point that you can maybe attach something to the plaster that you can pin into. And I do have a video on how to make a plaster hat block. It can work if it's the right kind of shape and it's using the right kind of techniques, which I have since figured out more recently since starting YouTube. So there is a video on that. If husband, would you like to post that into the chat? It's the video called Making a Plaster Hat Block, I think. Making Jackie Kennedy's inauguration hat. But let's chat a bit about what's going on in these pictures and how it's different to the previous iteration of my first attempt at remaking this hat. Firstly, you can see all of my edges are really neat. That buckram is folded over the edges, and in my pillbox video, that's exactly what I do with the wire in the pillboxes, is fold that bias cut buckram over the wires. So clearly somewhere in all this time I've either read or on a course I picked up that one should do that. It's then also covered in damet to protect it, to take away the bumpiness and the harshness and the hardness of the buckram so that the velvet sits nicely. Lovely. And then once I'd covered it in silk velvet, this is the result, and I think it's rather lovely. Let's see a close-up of that. Here it is. It's really nice. So the only thing salvaged from that original vintage hat is these original decorations. Does anyone know what these kind of decorations are called? Because I'd love to find some so that I can recreate this hat shape, because I get a lot of interest in people wanting to buy this kind of hat, but I can't really make it again because I don't know what these are called. I think they're kind of goldwork applique, but I don't know if I've got that right. So if anyone knows, let me know what these decorations are called. But here it is. Here is this glorious silk viscose velvet buckram hat. Right, next slide. This is me going off piste again and experimenting with calo half hats. Here's the hat from there. There are many issues with this hat, but I'll tell you a little bit about the philosophy of what I was going for in this hat. Essentially, I had a dress. It's the illustration that you see there on the right. I don't actually have any pictures of that dress. I don't have any pictures of me wearing that dress. So all I have is that illustration from memory of what that dress looked like before it got made into a hat. So that dress was silk. Silk satin there is what you see on the inside of the hat, and silk chiffon is what you see on the outside of the hat. And the outside of the hat, all this ruffle, is made with that ruffle trim that you can see on the picture going down the front of the dress. All that ruffle ended up being on this hat. So I just took those long bits of silk chiffon, ran some gathering stitches through them on the sewing machine, pulled it all together, pulled it as tight as I could get it, and then popped it on this buckram base hat. And we'll get on to some problems with this base in a second. But the inside, and I thought this was rather clever, the inside is actually made from the bust cups from the dress, because when I looked at them, I kind of took the dress apart and I looked at the bust cups and I thought, if I just stick them together, they kind of make a dome shape. So I thought I'd use that to line the inside of the hat. I thought that was rather clever. I can't say I've done that since in any other hat, but I just really like the idea that the inside of the hat is actually the bust cups. Let's talk about the problems with this. So, the problems with this hat. It's a little bit flimsy, and that's because this is before I figured out how to do a proper wire join. So I can actually feel at the back end of this hat, the wire is doing something very weird. I can't remember what on earth is going on inside this hat, but there actually isn't a piece of wire over here. Look at how flimsy that is. So the wire is going all the way along this hat, from the back, going forwards to the back, and then for some reason, there's no wire here in the center. I have no idea why I did that. I have no idea why I didn't join the wire. I would have learnt how to join wire. It's one of the first things you ever learn in millinery is how to do a wire join, and I do have a video on that because it's a piece of universal knowledge that everyone needs to know. But for some reason, I didn't do it in this hat. No idea why. But I do like this hat. I like wearing it, and I like that it's repurposed fabric. Maybe if I was to do it again, I would do it slightly differently because I can actually see the thread from my gather stitches, which isn't the best thing, but I think this hat looks quite nice on the head. So if I change camera views again and pop it on my head, I quite like the shape of it. So it's a camo half hat, but it's not got this plain pointy edge. It's a kind of more adventurous cutout edge. Oh, over here, these two cutouts. This was quite a common thing that you see in kind of mid-century hats from the 50s, where it's either a skull cap. A skull cap is essentially a full-on version of a calo, and a calo is half a skull cap. The way that this just sits on the head, and you see a lot of vintage hats with a lot of cutouts and fun shapes and all the exciting stuff, and I thought I wanted to try it, and here we go. It kind of accommodates my ear point, which I don't remember factoring that into the design, but it happened. And I quite like how square it is on me as well. I'm a big fan of symmetry. I know a lot of people don't like symmetrical hats, but this is definitely something that I like. And it's something that I don't see a lot of hats now being made symmetrically, modern hats, for ascot or for weddings and things like that. So I like to plug that gap in the market and just make symmetrical hats. But then on the other hand of that, I do always say to people, there's no right or wrong way to wear a hat on your head. You can wear a hat however you like. If it is a symmetrical hat, but you don't want to wear it symmetrically, you can just kind of angle it and tilt it, play with it on your head, because we all have different head shapes, we all have different faces, and hats will all suit us in different ways. Right, let's move on. Ooh, I need a prop for this next one. Husband, can you bring me one of the giant shells from our bathroom, please? All will become clear in 1 second. So, this is one of the first hats that I dreamt up for myself. I vividly remember just waking up one morning and thinking, oh my goodness, eureka moment, I must make this hat. Yes, that's exactly what I need. And it's inspired by one of these shells. So remember what that hat looks like. I'm now going to show you a close-up of this shell. Oh, so many hats everywhere. So here it is. Here is the shell. And here is the hat. Look at that. Inspiration is everywhere. And this is one of my favorite designs. I love it so much. I love wearing it. I actually don't have the white one anymore because that was sold. So I've only got it in green, and this is my display model. I want to make another white one. So I love this hat. And this is part of the hats in the video about millinery and the bias and pleats and all of that. Once again, pleats coming back. I love pleats. There's so many different ways to use them. And this is one of them. And I think this was a really pivotal moment for me. This is kind of where, I mean, yes, I'd made this yellow hat from the previous slide, and I didn't really dream this one up. This was a kind of a physical making process where I had a dress, didn't know what to do with the dress, took the dress apart and went, okay, fine, well, I'll just make a hat then. And I was just kind of going along with the flow of what the fabric wanted to do without having a clear end goal in mind. But this hat, I had a specific end goal, and it was this. And I think I've been 100% successful with making it. Although recently I've had a few other ideas of how I could make this and troubleshoot a little bit, because these bias pleats, they do move a little bit, and sometimes you end up with a little gap in between the pleats, which isn't too great. So I was going to play around with, instead of separate pleats, getting a big piece of fabric and not cutting it up into strips, but pleating it into this shape while it's a full piece of fabric. I have a book on pleating that I bought a while back that I've been making my way through reading. And I think there is a chapter in that book on how to create this kind of pleats. I mean, it's more for skirts and radial pleats and things like that, but I'm sure I can apply it to hats. So that's something that's on my kind of to-do list that I would like to do relatively soon. I'm about to run out of camera battery on the overhead camera, so I would appreciate a little bit of tech support from my husband to come and change the camera battery. How are we all doing in the chat? Michael says, I love repurposing material. My hat today used to be a skirt. Oh, how fabulous. Wonderful. Oh no, not that camera. The overhead camera. How's everyone doing in the chat today? We're just going to check the focus. Over here, please. Perfect. Let's all say a big thank you to my husband for crawling around on his knees trying to change camera batteries. Yay. Oops, off I go. I think I'm about to be back. There we go. And now we'll focus. I think we're good. Right. Let's carry on. So where did we get up to? I wanted to talk about finding inspiration. So we're now in 2019 and Dior is holding its biggest, their biggest kind of exhibition ever at the V&A. I actually saw this exhibition twice. I first saw it in Paris, in France, because we just happened to be passing through on a dance event, on a dance trip. And I wasn't sure at that time that it was going to come to the UK, and I did not want to miss this massive Dior exhibition. I'm sure most of you possibly remember this being a very big deal, the Dior exhibition. I can't remember what it was actually called. No, I have the exhibition catalogue somewhere, but I can't remember what the actual exhibition was called, but it was one of the biggest exhibitions. And they had this thing at the exhibition. This is actually at the V&A. These photos aren't from the Paris one. This is from the V&A. They had something called an accessory wall, where they kind of put on display a lot of hats and shoes and little mini three-quarter mannequin mock-ups of Dior's accessories, dresses, shoes, hats, handbags, everything. And that was an incredible experience to just walk down this corridor surrounded by absolutely stunning hats. Absolutely amazing. And I wish I'd taken more photos. These three are kind of the only photos I took. But you can see some interesting designs there. Once again, silk velvet, feathers, something with a veil that looks a bit more modern, but also a bit vintagey. So yes, inspiration. So inspired by shells in my bathroom, or inspired by Dior's hats in exhibitions. So once again, if you're a bit stuck and you don't know what hat to make, and you've already done the thing where you've bought a vintage hat, you've taken it apart and you've tried to remake it just to learn, that's a good way to learn. Then you go back and don't know where to find your inspiration. Look at your local museum, local fashion museum, see what they've got on. Maybe they've got an exhibition on, maybe they've got an archive. Call up the archive, maybe they'll let you visit and see the exhibition. See some of the items. I know the V&A in London, you can call up the archive, make an appointment, and at least you used to be able to. I don't know if you can anymore. And they will help you handle the hats. They'll let you take lots of photos, lots of reference images for yourself, and then you can go home and digest all of that and figure out how to make that hat that you've just seen. So yeah, that's just inspiration. Next hat. So these were all inspired. So what I did see at the exhibition was there was this one hat, and I could not find a picture of it. I changed phones since then, and I'm pretty certain that picture might have got lost in the process. But it was a hat that had a kind of crossover ribbon on it as an X or like that, as you can see. And I really liked that idea. I liked the contrast between the kind of deep richness of the silk velvet and the reflectiveness of the organza ribbon that's folded there in that kind of X shape in the picture. And the pictures there is what you're looking at is my kind of physical design process. So once again, if you don't know what to do, get out your poupée head, pop all your stuff on the poupée head, pin it all down, take lots of photos, step away from it from a week, have a think about it. Do you like how it looks? Maybe you don't like how it looks. Then translate that onto a hat, see how you like it. So for example, that picture on the kind of middle right, that's a pillbox shape, just covered in damet. It's not covered in final fabric, but I was just assessing the shapes, the visual shapes. And on the back of it is one of the organza, silk organza handmade flowers, and the little kind of curved X shape. That's a bit of bias silk satin left over from a slip that I was making at the time. So it doesn't matter what you've got underhand, just to have a look at what shapes you can create with things that you have, and then you can refine them later. But I think the first step is always figure out just the general shape, squint at it. Once you've got it all on your poupée head, just close your eyes like this so that your eyelashes kind of cover your eyes, and squint at it and look at the overall shape. Look at the contrast that it has. Is it too big at the back? Is it not big enough at the back? Should the trim be central? Should the trim be to the side? Squint, and that kind of illusion will it will come to you. It will, trust me. You'll be fine. Right. Next slide, please. So, once again, figuring out, applying a technique that I'd learned on a previous course to things I already had at home. I forgot to put a picture in of the original hat that this comes from. I had bought a hat years ago that was like a 20 style cloche. And this is years before I got into hat making. And I realized I wasn't really wearing it. And now that I was into hat making and I knew what I was doing, I thought, okay, well, I can take it apart and reuse the materials just to experiment. This was supposed to be an experimental hat, and now it's turned into quite a popular model online that people really like. And it's this hat over here, what you can see in the pictures. Let me show you a quick close-up. Here it is. This one's actually slightly different to the one in the picture. Oh, I am slightly out of focus. If I bring it here, it's more in focus if it's further back. So this used to be a cloche wool felt. And since then, it's been put onto a pillbox hat block. And let's take this hat out of the way. It's been put onto a pillbox hat block, and the veining kind of happened by accident. Because what happened here is, because this felt had already been stretched into quite a rounded dome cloche shape. Gosh, that's difficult to say. It wouldn't actually want to pull forwards over the shape of my pillbox. So I ended up having to keep these veins. But I thought, do you know what? Never mind. Let's not give up. We'll turn it into a design feature. And it's turned into this interesting bumpy design, and I really like that. And on the side it's trimmed with some berries. These are actually vintage berries that I've put together, and some handmade flowers and leaves. The picture in the slide is using a commercially available sprig of berries, just because that makes the overall hat cheaper to sell. But if someone really wanted, this would be really expensive to sell to someone, because these are just, yeah, they just are expensive. They're vintage berries. There's not an unlimited supply of them in the world. They are an exclusive item, so I don't kind of throw them around willy-nilly. Yes, but so back to the idea of going back to hats and refashioning them. When I first made this hat in 2020, I'd put a comb in, and the comb was just a standard plastic comb. In fact, it was the same kind of comb as on this hat here. This is just a plain plastic comb. But I went back and revisited this hat quite recently, and I've now started putting in all my combs covered in a bit of bias silk velvet, because I just think they look better and they're easier to sew on. So that's another trick. And also, again, don't worry about coming back to a hat and carry on playing with it even when you think it's finished, because there's always something to finish. It's like a painting, right? It's like a painting, or like a piece of music. Anything creative, anything artistic. Is it ever really finished? Is it ever finished? Not really. You can always go back and edit it again. At least that's what I think. Next slide. Back to the turbans. So, these turbans never saw the light of day. What you're seeing in the images here is some hard work that I put in one afternoon trying to get a pin tuck chiffon turban to work, and I just didn't really like how it was going. I couldn't find it. I wanted to make an orange turban, the same kind of turban that I'd made on the course, once again to practice the skills and not forget them. So this turban, remember, from the Central St. Martin's course. I wanted to make it again in orange to match a pair of shoes that I had bought. But I couldn't find orange silk dupion, and I thought, okay, well, I can't find a matching orange dupion. I'll just go with silk chiffon instead. And that wasn't really a great choice because the chiffon didn't really hold its shape very well. Chiffon worked really great in this hat, but it didn't really look right in the turban. It was those pin tucks are too structured for that turban. I think the lightness of chiffon works much better with a kind of messy ruching than with neat pin tucks. So this is a day of experiments that led nowhere, but as you can see, I took lots of pictures, and every now and again I will look back at those pictures and I will think, okay, what can I learn from these pictures? This is an experiment that I did. I didn't like it, but that doesn't matter. Maybe I'll be able to do something with it in the future. So I was trying different knot shapes with the turban. Will the chiffon work with like one of those, I don't know, I'm sure there's a name for it, with the one that's sticking out to the side. I'm sure there's a name for that shape. But I've seen that in a few vintage books with turbans that have that sticking out. I thought, well, maybe I can distract from the fact that the chiffon doesn't look so great by putting some flowers on it. That's always a great tip. Put in a trim as a distraction. But clearly wasn't a distraction enough because I still didn't like it. So, and that was May 2020. So don't worry about it. Try again. Try an experiment. Find some time. Play around. Next slide. March 2020. This was around the time... Have we hit the pandemic yet? I think this is when the pandemic hit. My time perception is very warped. I think this is when the pandemic hit. And I was at home and nothing to do. I got very annoyed that I wanted to make some flowers. I didn't have any flower tools. Once again, going back to what we were talking about earlier about, do we need to buy all the tools? No, we don't need to buy all the tools. I was getting really annoyed that I couldn't figure out a way to make these kind of cupped flower shapes. And I thought, okay, well, I'll just do it using a hair straightener. Or rather, not a hair straightener, a hair curler. I think we spoke about this in one of my previous live streams. I can't remember which one. You'll just have to go and watch all of them. But these orchids were made with a hair curler instead of a flower tool, because I figured that a rounded end of a hair curler is pretty much the same thing as a rounded ball head flower tool. It's dome that heats up. It will make the dimples, and it did. I think they're quite nice, and in fact I've got this hat here. It's one of my favourite hats, actually, for the winter. I wear this a lot in the winter. It's a nice little pillbox. And here are the orchids, and the back of them is backed in gold, and then the front of them is a layer of chiffon and cotton, I think, and they're all wired. And I do have a tutorial on this somewhere. Maybe I'll link to it in the description box after the video, because this was written up on my blog before I had a YouTube channel. Oh, has my microphone disconnected? Oh dear. Okay, let's test the audio. Is that audio better? Thanks, Rachel, for noticing that. Rachel says that March 2020 is when the US went into lockdown. UK might have been a bit earlier. I think it might have been around the same time. Is the microphone okay? Oh. Oh, microphone is fine. Okay. I should carry on then. So, yes. So this is the product of me being annoyed with not having any flower tools. So I tried to figure out a way to do it myself. And there it is. And back to answering, I think, whose question was I answering at the very beginning? Yes, Anissa. Your question about where should you start? This is one of these factory-made hat bases. It's not the best thing in the world. It's just one of these stewardess ones. But it's a good base for if you just want to play around with the shape and how you can trim it. And I remember changing this base a bit by steaming it and holding the edge together with pliers just to smoosh it down a little bit and get a slightly different shape. So it's a little bit more custom than just a plain old base with no alteration. So here's this hat. Next slide. This is when I decided to finally register my domain name for my web shop. So May 2020, during the lockdown, finally had some time on my hands, set up my web shop through WordPress using WooCommerce, which is all free. So the only thing I pay for is the domain name and server storage space. And that's when I bought the domain name and registered it, and it did kind of take me about 6 months to get the website actually up and running, but that's when I bought the domain name. And if you'd like to go and check out the website, it's www.byalona.co.uk, and you can see all my hats for sale there. I've got a little blog where I link all my YouTube videos in. You can have a look at my digital downloads. I actually don't think that's been populated enough, but there's a few things there that you guys might be interested in if you're just starting out. Having a look at what I've got, what I do, why I do it. So that was a big step. And I couldn't have done it without the support of my wonderful husband. Next slide. What have we got here? Oh, it's bright yellow. So this is the, oh no, it's not quite the last millinery course I did. Yes, so I thought to myself, okay, well, what's the next step? I want to be a little bit more professional now. So this is 2020, 2021. So we've kind of cycled through the beginner stages of, oh, I just want to make a hat for myself, to, oh, this is actually very interesting, to dreaming up hats in my sleep, and now thinking, okay, I've got a website, I want to develop this as a career path for me, which is something I never thought I would be doing, which is apparently how a lot of people get into hat making. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I should do a qualified course, because I don't know about you guys, but in British society, in British culture, we really do value a good qualification. So let me show you my qualification. I have a certificate of distinction in the City and Guilds Millinery Level 2 fashion course, or whatever it's called. Anyway, turns out, useless qualification, no point in doing it. No, okay, I'll be a bit more diplomatic. So if I'm being very honest, I don't think this course was for me. this course would have been very good for someone who wants to go on and do the course after that, which is a qualification called the HNC, I think, or H1D, H1C, something. Do you know what? If you've got questions about this, go and ask John from JWH Millinery. I think he might have done the HNC in millinery. I'm not sure. He will know more about this than me. I'll link to his channel down below. I'll also link to Rachel's channel, Labricaloose, and also SH Millinery, who I did see in the chat at some point. Hi, Sarah. Nice to have you. So I'll link to all the Millinery Community channels down in the description box after the stream. So have a look at all of their videos and ask them questions too. Everyone's always very happy to answer everyone's questions. We want to spread the joys of millinery. But this course essentially, I think you kind of want to take this course, firstly, if you want to take the next course above it, because you have to have this course to take the HNC. And the HNC was just prohibitively expensive for me. I couldn't justify affording it. I would still love to do it. And maybe one day, if I had enough money in savings, I would go and do that course. But I think that course is, oh no, it's just too expensive for me. So this was the course that was within my budget. And I thought, okay, it's the only accredited course in my budget. I'll go and do it for the qualification. And I slightly regret it because I don't actually think I learned anything new. It didn't even put things into context for me either. I mean, it got me interested in dyeing things and color matching. So that's that top left image there, working with dyes in millinery. But again, I didn't feel like it was taught on the course. It was just kind of supervised, and there was nothing I couldn't have learnt myself from books. So in this case, the biggest thing I learned on this course is that I don't need to do accredited courses. I just need to go and do courses by technique from specific millinery tutors who specialize in very specific things. So, for example, Tina specialized in vintage millinery technique, so that was a great course for me to take. Doing the flowers and things with Leanne Frederick at London Hat Week, that was a great eye-opener to the world of flower making. And, you know, just things like that. Finding courses that specifically target the techniques that you want to do at that time. And if you look up your local milliners, I mean, these days you don't even have to just look up local milliners. You can look up your online milliners and see what courses they offer. I will be offering some courses soon, so keep your eyes open for that. There'll be video courses, so you can check those out once they go live at some point in the next year, probably towards Christmas, because I figured if I'm going to offer you guys a course, it's got to be very well planned and well thought through. So that's what I will be working on, and I am working on. So there we go. Oh, Rachel's posted links to milliners on YouTube in the comments if you want to, sorry, not in the comments, in the chat, if you guys want to check that out now and just open them up in tabs in your computer so that you can go and have a look at those channels once we sign off on the live stream. And I think Anissa says, thank you very much for your advice. You're very welcome. I hope you found it helpful. I'm yet to answer your second question. Don't worry. It is on my list of questions to answer. So I'll leave the City and Guilds millinery course there and move on to the next slide. So at this stage, we're kind of getting to a lot of millinery things happening simultaneously in my life at the same time because it's lockdown. I'm doing this course, it's online, so I'm not wasting my time commuting, traveling to the college. So I've got time to do things at home. And I thought, okay, well, I've paid some money on this course. I'm learning things on this course. I'm going to treat myself to my first fancy hat block, which was this kind of bumper beret. I call it a bumper beret. It's from Guy Morse Brown Hat Blocks. It's a really lovely hat block. I had them make it in a slightly different size to their default, so it's a different size to what they usually offer. But this is the great thing about commissioning hat blocks, is you can ask the block makers to change things. If you know what you want, then ask away and go for it. Because I I needed something just slightly different to what they were offering, and they did that for me. And this is one of my most favorite blocks. I mean, it was one of my only fancy hat blocks for some time, but it's really great. And I've actually got my bumper beret model over here. Oh, it's too tall to be seen on the screen. But here it is. Let's have a close-up of it. The exposure might be a bit wrong. It's all black. I made this in a teal color and also a white color with black feathers. And these feathers are held on with hat pins because it's just easier to attach pom-poms with hat pins. Or at least that's what I found. So here is the beret, which, yes, that was a treat. I remember saving up and really worrying about it, worrying whether it was the right thing to do to spend such an amount of money on a hat block. But honestly, this shape has brought me so much joy and I love wearing it. And I hope other people like it too. I hope other people like it enough to buy some of those models from me so that I can recoup some of the cost of actually commissioning the block. But you know what? Even if no one wants to buy this shape from me, this shape in itself has given me so much joy to work with and look at that I don't really mind in this instance. There's some hat blocks that I regret, which I haven't actually included in this stream, but maybe I should have done. There's one particular hat block I regret buying, but never mind. We don't have to talk about all that negative stuff. Let's move on to the next slide. Otherwise, we'll never get through them. Oh, actually, before we go on to the next slide, the bottom 3 pictures there, you can see it's this black bumper beret, and what I was experimenting with is trim placement. So the picture on the very left is the pom-poms. The picture in the middle is a yellow bow made from a 1940s hat pattern, which is actually the same bow. It's half the bow that's on this pleated pillbox shape. And then the one on the right is this this flower. So you see, once I've learnt how to do a few trims, I can then interchangeably see how they look on various different hats, because now I've got that knowledge, I've got that knowledge base. I can now apply it to various different shapes and across different materials. Okay, now we'll move on to the next slide. So this is what we're celebrating today. It has actually been 1 year and 1 day since I started my YouTube channel. Yay! And I'm so grateful to all of you guys for watching all my videos, because without you guys, there wouldn't be any YouTube videos because no one would watch them. And if you're just stumbling across my channel for the first time, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm now becoming a little more professional and have a little icon that pops up on the screen. And so, yeah, thank you very much for watching all my videos. And I hope you enjoy my videos as much as I enjoy making them. Let's carry on moving through the hats. I have called this my emergency party hat. What does that mean? What even is an emergency party hat? Well, we had been in lockdown for so long at this stage, and I think this was in summer where we were allowed to go and sit with friends and family in gardens at this point. So we weren't really allowed to sit indoors, I think, but we were allowed to be in gardens with people. And we thought, okay, well, or at least I thought, okay, big occasion. We're going to see Matthew's family for a barbecue. I need to wear a hat because I haven't been out of the house for like 6 or 7 months at this point, or however long it had been. Or at least it felt like I haven't been out of the house for years. So I really wanted to dress up, and I had this lovely Hawaiian dress that I had made for myself way back in like 2015, 2016. And I wanted to match a hat to it. And this is what I came up with using materials that I had in my cupboard. So this is a seagrass capeline that is attached to, it's a seagrass capeline blocked in two parts. So one is blocked on a large dome brim, mushroom brim, and the top bit is just blocked on, actually, I think it's blocked on this crown block right here. And you can see in the second picture that the actual crown is poking out a little bit underneath. This hat still needs a little bit extra tweaking. I've actually got it over here. As this was an emergency hat, the design wasn't very well thought through and it needs tweaking. I think I need to take it apart again and reposition how this attaches, because it's not quite sitting too comfortably on the head. So the back is where the label is. It should go on this way, and then it should have the bow pointing up. And I think the thing that I've got wrong in this hat is I've made it slightly too small. I think the wire that I've put into the base, because so I put in a wire into the crown because it felt a bit flimsy. So I thought, okay, well, it needs a wire because this seagrass is very brittle and it's just going to break unless I reinforce it with something. But I think I must have made the wire just ever so slightly too small for my head size, because it's kind of perching on top of my head rather than sitting down onto my head. So I need to take this apart and remake it. Last year I did a kind of autumnal UFOs video. Maybe I should do towards the end of summer, or maybe towards the beginning of summer. I don't know. My timetable is so full right now. Towards the middle of summer, beginning, end, sometime, I need to make a summer UFOs videos. So if you don't know, a UFO is an unfinished object. And I should really try and figure out this hat, because I think it's a lovely idea, but it's just not quite finished. So I just need to work on it a little bit more. And the bow's coming off as well. I don't think I sewed that on very well. Look at that. It's all flimsy. Goes well with this dress, actually. It is a kind of 1940s shape, and this is a kind of 1940s dress, even though this is modern. But I think that works quite well. I would not have thought of this combination if it wasn't live on stream. That does make me want to put everything away and work on this hat now. But no, I have other projects that take priority. Let's move on to the next slide. I think we're almost coming up to the end of my slides. This was the very last millinery course I've been on so far. This was how to make a wireframe foss shape block. So if you remember at the beginning of the stream, I was talking about making this hat and how to make this kind of shape. And I tried making it in plaster and it didn't work. And in the end, I did end up buying just this kind of shape in a wooden block, this halo part here. But maybe what I should have done at the time, just to not splash out on a block as a beginner, because that was a bit of a silly block to buy as a beginner, to be honest, is making a wire-shaped block using foss shape. So what you've got in the pictures there are my process images. And this was a course run by Sarah Lomax called Block Making Using Wireframes. I'm sure if you look up Sarah Lomax, she might be running these courses again. So I don't plan on making a video on this because Sarah teaches it. But essentially you make a wireframe, you make it look like an armadillo with bias strips of buckram, and then you cover it in this stuff called foss shape, which is a thermoplastic, meaning that it's like this kind of fleecy, it feels like felt, until you get some steam on it or a heat gun, and it turns quite hard. And I've covered mine on the inside and the outside with this foss shape. And that makes it, this is the kind of method that you would do if you wanted to make a block that was this kind of halo shape or bandeau shape. This is more of a bandeau. The halo shape would have a higher build up in the middle. But yeah, was it my favorite course to do? Actually, I really liked Sarah as a teacher. I thought she was great. So yeah, no, I would recommend you go and do that course if you're looking at something like this to make. This is definitely something that I wouldn't have figured out by myself. It was just a bit too much information for me. I'm very good at the vintage materials that are in the vintage books, but the modern kind of cosplayer, thermoplastics, EVA foams, all of those things, That's such an alien world to me that I think there are resources on the internet that you can read for free, but because it just doesn't accommodate how my brain thinks, that is definitely a course that I would go and do. Maybe I should go and sign up to like making a cosplay armor course, out of foam course or something, because I can definitely see how that would apply to certain aspects of millinery. Um, so yes, maybe that's something I should do, is look outside of the world of millinery for courses that I can then apply to millinery. I think actually that answers a question that Rachel asked before the stream. So let me read out that question. So before the stream, Rachel asked me, what technique do you want to learn or get more practice with? So I guess it's this. I should really look into the world of what's going on in the modern world of millinery. I don't really have the time for that at the moment. But other than the thermoplastics and stuff, you'll notice there hasn't been a lot of straw going on. And that's because I've never been on a course that does straw. Apart from the City and Guilds millinery course where there was a straw unit, but I didn't feel like that was taught. I felt like that was supervised. And so I don't really feel like I learned anything. So I should probably do a straw course as well. Or I'll just experiment by myself and film myself doing it, and you can all experiment and watch me fail. Or rather, you can watch me experiment and watch me fail, and then you can learn from that and go and be successful in your first time making something out of straw. Maybe we'll do that at some point in the summer. And this is almost the last slide. So we are almost at the end of the live stream. And December 2021 is when I launched the Etsy shop. Now, Etsy has a lot of issues. They have very high selling fees. They have a bit of a confusing interface. They charge listing fees. They charge transaction fees. There's a lot of fees. So it's a lot more complicated than, for example, me running my own shop pretty much for free on WooCommerce. But what Etsy does do is it gives you, I think of my Etsy shop as kind of marketing. So again, we've kind of gone really to the end of like my millinery journey, and where I am now is, yes, I am selling hats, but obviously I want to sell more hats. So how do I do that? I need to try and market myself. And Etsy is one of those ways where I do that. I don't actually expect to sell a lot through Etsy, but I expect to get a lot of exposure through Etsy, and that's certainly cheaper than paying for like a big advertising campaign somewhere. So that's how I view the Etsy shop, and I've only listed a few things on there, but it just gives me a bit of an internet footprint. So go and have a look at my Etsy shop. It's there. If you search for Biolona Millinery, I come up. In fact, if you just search Biolona Millinery in Google, after being a year on YouTube, I think my internet footprint should be pretty large. Rachel says, I know a lot of milliners and custom cosplayers who do the same thing, maintain a shop there for the exposure. Yeah, that's pretty much how I was thinking about it. But yeah, and I'm not really a big fan of how Etsy works. I think it's really difficult to place a listing, like through the WooCommerce. Before I became a milliner, I was a graphic communication designer, and I made a lot of websites for a lot of people. And so I kind of know my way around the back end of how WordPress works. So it was quite simple for me to figure out how WooCommerce works. So I find that a lot easier than Etsy. Etsy has a lot of clicks, whereas WooCommerce is just 3 clicks and I'm done. Or maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but you know, it just, to me, for my workflow, I find WooCommerce easier. Before I show you guys the last slide, does anyone have any questions for me? Put them in the chat now. And while you're doing that, I'm going to answer some questions from my phone, from that I haven't managed to answer all the way through. So let's answer Anissa's second question. How do you fix the hat onto the head or hair? I saw combs and pins and other items, but my question is how? the way you block the comb on the hair. Thank you for your lovely videos. You bring so much inspiration, and I will continue to make hats. Thank you for your lovely, kind words, Anissa. I really appreciate that. And let's answer your question. So let's switch to a close-up view. So already in the stream, I did speak about the comb here. So this one isn't covered in silk velvet, but now I know from now on, that I want to cover my combs in velvet. So here's a velvet covered comb. In some of my videos, in any of my videos where you see me talk about combs for attaching hats, I do have explainers on how to sew them in and how to attach like the velvet to it, or this one is covered in a ribbon. This one's from my Pillbox's video, so if you want to go and have a look at that, I've got it there. So how is this one working? So let's switch to a different view actually. There we go. You can see me on the screen bigger there. So this comb is at the front of the hat. And it's at the front of the hat, it just slides on. That's all it does. The other fastening in this hat is, you can see them poking out here. This is something called crisp veiling ribbon, and I think you can do this with crin as well, but I haven't figured out how to do this. I think one of the other milliners was going to do a video on crin. I cannot remember who that was. Someone someday will post a video on how to work with crin in the Millinery YouTube community, but that won't be me. Because I don't know how to do that. But so I put in crisp veiling ribbon, which is this kind of netting ribbon stuff. You can probably use like tulle offcuts, but I like this because you can match it to hair colors. So I'm brunette currently, so I use brown netting ribbon, and I cross bobby pins through it. I don't have any bobby pins to show you, but imagine these are bobby pins. And when I say cross the bobby pins, essentially you put in one bobby pin into the netting ribbon, and then you get your other bobby pin and you go kind of around the other one like that. So one pin is holding the other. So I hope that makes sense, Anissa. Rachel says, I'm going to make a video on how to make horsehair inserts for pinning hats on the head. Great, everybody follow Rachel for that video. Rachel says, we put them into almost all theatrical hats to pin them into wigs. Yes, that's how I've come across them. And back from my dancing days where they used to put me in wigs to dance on television, they had little crin inserts that they would use in the wigs as well. So clearly an industry-wide thing. Let's talk about another fastening. Anissa says, it makes more sense than I thought. I'm so glad. So here's another type of fastening. So this one here, this only has a little bit of that crisp veiling ribbon, because what you don't want to do is over fasten a hat, if that makes sense. So for example, I could have put a comb in this hat, but does it need it? Not really. Because it's got this, go this way so that you can still hear me in the microwave, because microphone, because it's got this back bit over here, that's actually supporting the hat quite well onto my head. And the only problem with this hat is if there was no fastening in it, it would just always want to fall backwards. So that's why, to counterbalance it, I've put in the crisp veiling ribbon at the two front points here at my temples. So it's not directly above me, but it's over here, because it's now giving this hat 3 points of anchorage. One is the big bit at the back that's just holding itself on, and the other two are here at the front. So essentially you've kind of, you're thinking triangles. You're thinking triangles. And that's what's going to hold this on. And once I put crossed bobby pins through it like this, like we just explained, that's going to stay on and it's not going to fall off. In fact, I wore this hat to my friend's house party on Friday, and I wore this hat there, and my husband and I were dancing, and it only fell off once, and that's because he knocked it off my head with his hand. It didn't fall off because we were dancing. So bobby pins are always going to be great, and it means you don't have to faff around with any kind of extra bits inside the hats. Other than bobby pins, you've got everyone's favorite, and This is elastic, a hat elastic inside the hat. Everyone always seems to put elastic in a hat, and I can understand why that is, because it's really easy with a hat that's been elasticated. You put it on, you then pop that elastic under your hair, position the hat how you want it, whether that's straight on or like to the side a little bit. In fact, with this outfit, I think it looks quite nice on the angle. And then you've got the elastic. But here's the problem with the elastic. You can really see it here. You can really see it. And the only way, what I really hate is seeing a lady dressed up for Ascot or for a wedding or for a party, like any wonderful event that she's going to, and she's put in a lot of effort into her dress, into her makeup, into her hair, and then the hat just gets plonked on top and you can see the elastic. And it's such a shame because I think it really ruins the line of your hair. As you can see, I've now got a dimple. Now, in an ideal world, what I would do is actually, let me take these clips out of my hair. And then I'm just going to wear the hat underneath me for a second. And I'm going to take a little section of hair over here and just bring it forwards. And then a little section from the other side. So like this. And then I'm just going to hold it in my mouth for 1 second. On the hat goes. Then, if I had a hairbrush at this point, I would get my hairbrush. Let's show you on this side, because this is the side you can see. Position the hat however you want it. We decided on an angle with this outfit. For some reason, it works. And then use this hair to cover that elastic. And then I'm going to pop my clip back in, my comb. There we go. And now you can't see the elastic. Let me do the other side. This is much easier with a hairbrush. I'm going to have to lift this hat up a little bit to get the hair where I want it, and then use the comb. There you go. All hidden. And added bonus, the hat's not really going anywhere because not only have you got the elastic holding it to the back of the head in general, just kind of squishing it to your head, but you've also got your hair holding that elastic in place. Now, if you put something on with elastic and you didn't want to kind of cover it in your hair, sometimes there's hats like that. You can just cross bobby pins through the elastic as well if you didn't have like a hairstyle to hold that back. Rachel from La Bricalouse says, a millinery teacher of mine always said a hat should look like it blew in by a breeze and just landed perfectly on your head, meaning that you shouldn't see how it stays there, in his opinion. Yes, I've heard that before. I've also heard that in reference to actually making a hat, where a hat should just look like it was magically assembled and you shouldn't really see any stitches or construction lines and things like that, and you should have a light touch with it. In fact, I think some of the millinery books kind of reference that you must have a light touch as a milliner. Anyway, yes, thank you for that bit of wisdom, Rachel. Yes, that is, I think that's kind of how this one's sitting on my head. Have I missed out any other kinds of fastenings? Oh, the most obvious hat fastening, hang on. The most obvious hat fastening is just a head-sized hat. So this turban, which was blocked on a domed crown block that is my head size, technically shouldn't need any extra fastenings. So I could just pop this turban on, but I did put in extra crisp veiling ribbon because I wouldn't put in a comb because that would make it bulky. But this is why I like the crisp veiling ribbon, is that it just sits inside the hat and you can choose to use it, or it's tucked underneath and it's not going to interfere with the hat and you're not going to see how it's sitting on the head anyway. The reason I put the crisp veiling ribbon inside the turban is because I dance in this, and when I go upside down, I need it to stay on my head and not fall off. And that's essentially the only reason. Otherwise, a turban like this will just sit on your head without a fastening. So I hope that answers all those questions. Let's see, did I answer all the questions? I think I did answer all the questions, and no one else has got any extra questions for me in the chat. If you're watching this live stream, post it going live, and you're watching it on catch up, as it were, please leave me a comment if you've got any more questions, and I will answer them in the comments. Let me show you my last slide. I'm going to prepare you for this. Essentially, technically, this is the first hat I've ever made. Oh no, I'm going to move myself out of the way. Whoops. Can I move myself? 1 second. I wasn't as prepared as I thought I would be. There we go. Let's move me somewhere over here, down in the bottom. This was for a Halloween party in October 2015. This is why I'm technically calling this the first hat I ever made, because my husband and I wanted to go as Doctor Who and the TARDIS. So hello all of you Doctor Who fans. I'm a massive Doctor Who fan. And in one of the episodes, the TARDIS kind of comes to life, and it turns out that she's a lady and she has a soul and a heart and all of that. And she's just dressed in blue. And I thought, that's exactly what I want to be for Halloween. So there we go. Shall we talk about the construction of this hat? It's a metal hairband that that I pasted on with hot glue, I think, a glue gun, a paper plate that I'd painted the TARDIS blue colour, and then onto the top I put in like a little cylinder that I had little tabs on from like a 2D. Made it from a 2D with tabs so that I can stick it on. And then the top was a little comb triangle, and to get the little point on the end, I just stuck in a glass head pin. Anissa says, me too, who is your favourite Doctor? Ooh, well, it's a close call between Matt Smith and David Tennant. So there we go. That's my favourite Doctor. Well, my two favourite Doctors. I can't decide between the two of them because I really enjoyed David Tennant's kind of chaotic portrayal of like deep thinking, scientific sounding nonsense and constant hurriedness. But then I really liked how Matt Smith brought a kind of youthful, childish fun to the Doctor, whereas David Tennant was always a little bit more serious. So I like them both. And on that note, I think it's time to end the stream because we've been here for about 2 hours. So thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed learning about my millinery journey. I hope I've given you some interesting food for thought on where you might want to take your millinery and what things you might want to learn, what you might want to look into. Yeah, there we go. You can follow me on Instagram at Violona Millinery, where you can find pictures of kind of the work that I'm working on right now, day to day, and I post little stories and just generally pictures about what hats I'm currently making. And if you've enjoyed this live stream, please like and subscribe, and remember to hit that notification bell so that next time I'm live streaming, you don't miss it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting me for a whole year here on YouTube, and here's to many more hat videos and more fun. See you next time. Bye.